An easy play. Fresh dress, living large, German whips in my garage. Most my partners called the charge for all this love break out with bars. Fresh dress, living large, German whips in
Here's
my
Messi.
garage.
Away from 2, 3, 4. Wonderful.
These chicks be flocking.
Hi, welcome into the YFC Your Fielder's Choice DFS lineup review for NFL Week 1. My name's Adam, also known as V12, and we wanted to bring you a little bit of content in regards to our lineup building strategy for cash games on our NFL main slate Sunday. If you haven't already seen us on our Twitch live stream, which should launch 2 hours before the NFL slate locks, you can find more information and the links to those Twitch streams at yourfielderschoice.com. Here we're going to be bringing you a little bit of lineup review information and how the construction went in regards to building a main slate, main cash lineup. There's a lot of questions that you may have for us, and obviously we can answer those in our free Discord. We do want to bring you an insight, though, that whenever we're building our cash lineups and our main slate lineups, that we go through the process just as you do. So in the trenches with you here, we have a YFC version of lineup building and cash strategies for NFL. Feel free to check us out, again, Facebook, Twitter, and be sure to like and subscribe to this video. And just as important with lineup building, we have to focus in on what went right and, more importantly, what went wrong. Obviously, with this lineup, we had a very successful NFL Week 1, and you can see by this lineup, we absolutely crushed. But it's important to note what players did do and what players didn't do. So what we're going to do is we're going to go in our player pool, position by position, to help you see what we're seeing and help you build stronger, successful, winning lineups in cash. I want to start by talking about quarterback. Obviously, you can see the choice that we came with, which was Lamar Jackson. The biggest thing is, in the Twitch live stream, we had a 4-player cash pool for quarterback. This was obviously a decision that was made after looking at ownership percentage and, of course, production that we could expect from these guys. We did have Lamar Jackson, Matt Ryan, and Russell Wilson, who were the QB tandem from that high-scoring Seattle-Atlanta game, and, of course, Carson Wentz. A lot of this was because Miles Sanders was announced out the day before for the Philadelphia Eagles, which meant that the replacement Boston Scott, who was priced down in the $4,000 range on DraftKings, was going to be absolutely high-owned chalk. So we knew we had to play him. So looking at quarterbacks, obviously that got me to Lamar Jackson. I knew that we had other options there, but I knew baking in that floor of him rushing with the high implied total and the fact that he's just a dominant player against the Cleveland Browns, he made an easy choice for me. And even with the ownership being one of the top 2 quarterbacks probably on the board, I knew I could be different elsewhere. So Lamar Jackson was the absolute play there, and we knew that the floor was high enough in cash and we would be able to pay off that value. Next, sliding into running back, I want to talk a little bit about this because obviously Boston Scott was going to be the first player that we were going to look to. No, I'm not talking about Christian McCaffrey. I'm talking about Boston Scott. In cash games and double-ups and even head-to-heads, you need to expect that when a player is going to be as high-owned as he could be, that you have to play him in cash. Now, you could obviously be different, but what if he's owned at 65%? Let's just say he gets a couple touchdowns. Let's say he gets 200 all-purpose yards, or maybe he catches 12 passes out of the backfield. This is a guy you're going to want to have in your cash lineup, so you have to slot him in there, and we're going to always recommend something like that as an ownership play. Christian McCaffrey was, of course, leading the entire running back slate in top plays, and he turned in a great performance there. But he's also $10,000 on DraftKings. Maybe on FanDuel we play him, but we knew if we're going to play Lamar Jackson, or I knew if I was going to play Lamar Jackson at quarterback, that we were going to have a tough time being able to fit McCaffrey in there. I turned to a couple of other running backs that I liked a lot more that were within the $6,500 to $7,500 range. Obviously, the number one that we spoke about on the stream was Josh Jacobs of the Oakland Raiders. He was in an absolute smash spot. He shows a lot of talent right now. John Gruden trusts him. We know he's a bell cow kind of running back. And, of course, the Panthers' defense is absolutely abysmal. You could definitely play an entire Raiders stack here and be successful in this game. The Panthers' defense actually lost a lot of players, including Luke Kuechly, who was a staple of that run defense. In total, they lost about 400 snaps from all the defensive players that weren't there anymore. So, obviously, with that kind of a turnover, the Raiders were going to take advantage. We also loved Alvin Kamara, Austin Eckler, and to an extent, some Joe Mixon and Chris Carson. I did play Chris Carson and some Todd Gurley in GPP to stack that game, but this was kind of a miss here because I didn't bang the table for Chris Carson, even though I knew he was in a great spot, and he was priced down. So with running backs, I decided I knew I had to play Boston Scott. I knew I loved Josh Jacobs, but popular to belief, I do like playing running backs in the flex spot. Alvin Kamara was a guy that I loved there. I wanted exposure to that NFC South divisional Saints and Tampa Bay Buccaneers game. So I thought if I can't play Michael Thomas, I'm going to try to play Kamara, who I felt was priced a little bit below what he probably should have. So you have Alvin Kamara and Austin Eckler, $200 apart. I knew this was going to be a big decision for me, but I went ahead and slotted Kamara in the flex and decided to make it work somehow. This was obviously very successful, and I'm going to be able to probably tout my horn a little bit and just say, hey, listen, we made a good play here and we can kind of move on. Eckler was actually a bust, but it could have gone either way. That's the benefit to being in a live Twitch stream and hearing other people being able to kind of talk you off the ledge to an extent. So in return, we're going to go into wide receiver and see what we thought about there. So with wide receiver, this actually is really what made my line work, and this was the play that kind of was the pivot point and what I built the rest of my lineup off of. Obviously, I told you we had to play Boston Scott. Lamar Jackson was actually a decision I made pretty early in lineup building, but with skill players, I knew that with wide receiver, I had to be smart because there was a ton of plays that I liked. You could pay up for Michael Thomas, who's an absolute stud. You had guys like Devontae Adams, Adam Thielen. Of course, you had the Michael Evans, Odell Beckham Jr. There's a lot of guys in those range that we really liked. From the $5,000 to $6,000 range on DraftKings, there were actually a ton of options that popped. I know Marvin Jones Jr. was one of the guys that came in as a value play with Kenny Golladay sitting out. Obviously, we could pay for a lot of guys in that range, go up to Allen Robinson at about the 6.5K mark, or we could go down to Deshaun Jackson. He was a value play. We knew he absolutely crushed the Washington football team this last year, but as of always, we had to have a lot of people in the stream because this was absolutely money here. As you know, Devontae Adams was actually one of the picks that Mike Miz23 talked about in his GPP article. I love Devontae Adams, but after I talked to Mike, I was like, man, this is a guy I really have to get in my lineup. Obviously, ownership was starting to climb on him a little bit, but wide receiver was one of the most spread out positions for ownership. And of course, in cash games, we do have to keep that in mind. With Devontae Adams, I knew that he was going to get a ton of targets. I knew there wasn't going to be a lot of competition for that. And I knew Aaron Rodgers, based off of the Packers, drafting a quarterback really high in the draft to replace him probably, you knew he was going to be pissed off. He was going to be ready to throw the ball and ready to dominate. The Vikings actually lost a lot of their players, including their top two corners, and having an inexperienced cover corners on Devontae Adams was going to be troublesome for them. If you looked at it, Xavier Rhodes was out. They have Holton Hill in the group that was guarding him in there for that. But so the Vikings obviously were in a tough spot, and we knew Adams would get peppered with targets and with looks from Aaron Rodgers. Marvin Jones, as I mentioned before, was obviously somebody that I looked at. But thanks to talking to the other guys, especially Devin, he was very adamant with the fact that Marvin Jones just wasn't a great play. So that kind of brought me down to who can I pair with Lamar Jackson? And sure enough, at 5,100 on DraftKings, Marquise Hollywood Brown was just sitting there. The great part about YFC is we have guys from all over and tons of different backgrounds and teams that we follow. Fortunately, the Baltimore Ravens are Mike Miz23's favorite team, so I want to give him a shout out here. As he follows a lot of the team news, he knew that Marquise Brown actually gained over 20 pounds of muscle going into the season. He wasn't a big receiver, and so that was obviously a concern of a lot of people playing him. In the dynasty circles, we knew he had immense talent, immense speed, but the guy was also going to be one of those Deshaun Jackson types that was going to get hurt quite a bit. But with the fact of this news, with his increased build, muscle, and speed, I knew that he was going to be a play that I was going to target because I probably wasn't going to be able to get to Mark Andrews at the tight end position. So with that, the last piece, I knew that I wanted to get someone from the Seattle-Atlanta game. I was looking at Hayden Hurst, the Atlanta tight end, formerly of the Baltimore Ravens that replaced Austin Hooper. But after kind of digging in, I looked through and I really saw that DK Metcalf was just somebody that I was comfortable playing and that I thought, hey, this guy can be a game breaker and it only takes one play for him to absolutely smash his value. I'm sure you're going to see his price tag climb. Obviously, Tyler Lockett's there, but Russell Wilson really likes Metcalf, and he showed towards the end of the season that he was a big play guy and somebody to look towards in the end zone. So that's what happened. Marquise Brown, Devontae Adams, DK Metcalf. Obviously, that was a success. It could have gone a different way. I could have jumped on some value, but thankfully, we have guys on our team at YFC and in this essential Twitch live stream that helped with the wide receiver position. And here we come to tight end. Man, it was the absolute grossest position for me on the entire slate. I mentioned that in the stream. I mentioned how much I hated it, but at the same time, I knew there was a few plays that I wanted to hone in on. Thankful when talking through, we were talking about that Marvin Jones at the wide receiver position. Obviously, with no Kenny Galladay, I knew Matt Stafford was going to have to throw somewhere. And I mentioned before that I considered Hayden Hurst, but outside of just the obvious pay-ups like your George Kittles, and of course if we had Travis Kelce on the slate, or you could say Zach Ertz or any of those guys up there, but I really love TJ Hawkinson. And it just kind of popped in my head that Devin was constantly saying, hey, Marvin Jones just probably isn't the most talented receiver. Marvin Jones' chalk day is never good. And I knew these things too, but I was like, man, TJ Hawkinson's a stud. He's going to be the play. He's the value play that I can get exposure with no Galladay. So this is obviously going to be the answer and the piece to the puzzle that I was missing. But as you know, with tight end, it's one of those last positions that I focus on. It's one of the last positions that a lot of people focus on in lineup building because honestly, you can get a lot of value paying down at tight end in other spots. So that was something I was going to focus on. Dallas Goedert was a name that popped in my head as an Eagles fan. I followed him quite a bit. I knew there was a ton of value there, especially in the red zone looks. And then, of course, I was looking down, and you had Chris Herndon of the New York Jets. He was priced down about $3,300 on DraftKings, and we knew that he was going to be super cheap and kind of popular in cash games. It wasn't a horrible play. Obviously, the Jets are probably going to be bad this year, but there was an obvious target that was there in the short dump-off passing game that they could focus on. And hey, I mean, he's only $3,300, right? But as I dug down and looking through some news, I did notice that Logan Thomas was dirt cheap, almost min-priced at $2,800 on DraftKings. It wasn't a great play. I didn't feel good about it. Like I said, tight end was gross. But hey, sometimes you get lucky, and that's what happened here. As you can see on the stats, obviously he turned in a touchdown. This was absolutely huge, paid us off, and of course we moved up in the placing in the standings on the DK slate. But at the same time, tight end was such a small player pool. I don't want you to get overly focused on that when building. Look and see if you can pair someone with your quarterback. Obviously, a Mark Andrews type would have been huge for me if I could have paid for him here. Hayden Hurst would have gotten me exposure to that Atlanta-Seattle game. And then, of course, TJ Hawkinson was a smash play. If you actually look back on the slate, Hawkinson, Goddard, of course, Mark Andrews, all of these guys actually turned out big. George Kittle was at the top. If people paid up for him, they're absolutely frustrated to hell because guess what? The guy got hurt. We're hoping he gets a lot better, and of course, we hope he gets healthy. But at the same time, we're focused on what guys did and what guys didn't do in regards to this NFL slate. So that's tight end. I do want to move on to defense to close this baby out. So with defense, listen, I'm going to make this very easy for you. This is not something you should prioritize, especially in your cash game and head-to-head builds. Obviously, in GPPs, more often than not, it's kind of sad, but a lot of those tournaments are decided by defense and special teams. It's kind of one of those things that you just go into it with cash games and say, hey, whoever fits. So for me, it was very, very simplistic and very easy. It was either going to be the New England Patriots for me against the Dolphins, or I was going to pay down. I could sit there and analyze defenses all day long, but I'd be wasting your time. So in cash games, here's my strategy of the day for you. If you're playing your defense, try not to play it against a ton of your offensive players. You do want to pay down because most often these 2K, 2100, 2200 defenses are probably going to put up some kind of positive points, and that's going to allow you other positions on the slate. As a diehard Eagles fan, I will tell you that I wanted to emphasize in the article that you're going to be doing most of your DFS playing with your brain and with your pocketbook. Don't do it with your heart. That's for your fantasy teams or the work leagues that you may have with your buddies. But hey, if you're trying to make money and build your bankroll, listen to people that know what they're talking about. Don't be so absorbed in groupthink, and make sure that you're going to be joining a team like us here at YFC, getting in these live Twitch streams. These are all tools to help you get better. So to end with, it was New England Patriots, or it was the New York Jets or Washington Redskins. Mike Miz 23 told me that the Redskins were just going to be a great play today. Eagles had offensive line trouble, including so many injuries, and so we knew that Washington was viable at only a minimum $2,000 price tag on DraftKings. But guess what? Here's my mistake. I still played the New York Jets at $100 more when I had the ability to go down to the Washington football team. But hey, sometimes we make mistakes on there. But I'm going too long already. This is our NFL Week 1 review. These are, of course, cash game applicable, head-to-head applicable. For GPP or tournaments or any other questions you may have, check us out at yourfielderschoice.com. Check out our Mismatches article. Jump in our live Discord chats that we have weekly. And, of course, the Discord is free right now, so jump in, yourfielderschoice.com. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks, and have a great day.
German whips, fancy cars, they play the game but they know who the champions are. Every time we pull up it's like a damn bazaar. They scream our name, try to get us on the camera. Flashing lights, though I ain't the flashy type. I just push a big whips with the fastest pipes. Can't match his price, I don't nigga catch for life, but I still never pay the full package price. And fuck the law.